Hey, greetings. It's Dr. Manfra. This presentation will focus on the first two modules of our course, ECI 525. We'll focus on the big questions of why social studies and how do students learn social studies. The discussion that follows will be based on the first two sets of readings for the course, focused on defining the social studies and how students learn. In Diane Ravitch's essay about the history of the social studies, she claims that social studies is rife with confusion. I'm curious about your take on this as social studies teachers. Is the field rife with confusion? Has it lost its focus on the subject of history? According to the National Council for Social Studies, rather than being confused, social studies is complicated and complex. It covers a variety of different topics and areas. In the definition offered by the National Council for Social Studies is a coordinated systematic study that includes many disciplines as well as cross-disciplinary content, all focused on helping students become more informed and better citizens, participating in a democratic society. The National Council of Social Studies operationalizes this definition a bit in their guiding vision from 2008, in which they offer four characteristics of powerful social studies. The first is that social studies teaching and learning are powerful when they're meaningful. Here the notion is that social studies must be based on clear content and also a depth of content for students. Social studies teaching and learning is powerful when they're integrative seems to refer to going across a variety of different disciplines and also issues that students might face. Here, the National Council of Social Studies emphasizes teachers as reflective practitioners. Point C is that social studies teaching and learning is powerful when they're value-based. Here it seems that they're beginning to focus more on the notion of social studies as preparation for future life or for participation in civic life by helping students understand opposing points of view and engaging in value-based learning. Finally, social studies teaching and learning are powerful when they're challenging. Here they offer a thoughtful explanation of the concepts that students might engage in and the way in which those concepts would reflect issues beyond the school walls. So as we take this body of work together, the two statements by the National Council, and juxtapose those with Diane Ravitch's history of the social studies, you as a reflective practitioner are encouraged to think through how this work reflects on your own understanding of your field, how it reflects on your understanding of the purposes of social studies, and what you hope your students to gain from their experiences in your classroom. Now, the second set of readings takes us in a different direction, towards neuroscience and how students learn. These readings are from the National Council for Research and were part of a larger project on how students learn that was intended to provide a meta-analysis of studies in the field. The idea was to provide a really accessible text for teachers and teacher educators so that they could develop teaching and learning experiences for students that, again, are meaningful and are brain-based. In the first chapter that we read for our course, Chapter 5, focused on the mind and the brain. Here we delved into neuroscience. The authors of the chapter guide us through three major points of discussion. First, that learning changes the actual physical structure of the brain. They describe ways that scientists know about how learning changes the structure of the brain and provide some examples. They also suggest that these structural changes alter the functional organization of the brain. So learning organizes and reorganizes the brain. And finally, that different parts of the brain may be ready to learn at different times. The final point is important for thinking about the developmental appropriateness of a variety of learning experiences for students as well as thinking through a learning trajectory in our subject matter. Two things I wanted to highlight. The first is the role of experience. Over and over again, the chapter really highlights the importance of experiential learning for students and how these experiences help to organize information in the brain. If you reflect on your own learning experiences, chances are they're times of great, perhaps either emotion, cognitive dissonance, or some other type of unique experience that impact your learning. Perhaps also you were motivated to learn or you're highly engaged. And so that type of learning or the content that you learned in those experiences has stuck with you. The second point to highlight is the notion of having an active brain. And I think this connects with the previous point about the importance of experience and perhaps prior experience. So one example offered in the text was providing people with a list of words such as this one. And the way in which our brain is so powerfully and constantly reorganizing information that we can even create new memories. So when asked, people who were given this list often mentioned the word sweet was on the list. So they create this memory of sweet. However, what that sort of reveals to us is the way in which you're categorizing and organizing. Our brains are always looking for patterns in our experiences. So the big takeaway for us as classroom teachers are the way in which the findings about the brain and mind impact the way in which we should think about teaching experiences and the type of experiences that we should give our students. The chapter ends with 4 findings that are important for us to review. So after you've had a chance to review these findings, it's important to think about how you might integrate them into your own practice or reflect on the way your current practice is and the way in which it may or may not be kind of speaking to or building off or really leveraging what we know about brain science in the learning environment. That leads us to our second chapter, which focuses specifically on the learning environment. Here, the author suggests that learning theory does not offer a recipe. However, it does give us suggestions to follow in terms of ways to rethink what's taught, how it's taught, and how it is assessed. These authors draw our attention to 3 spheres, if you will, of learning: the learner-centered, knowledge-centered, and assessment-centered, which they situate in relation to each other and within the larger context of community. So what's learner-centered knowledge? Here, this seems to center on the understanding or the knowledge, beliefs, experiences, attributes of the learner in the classroom, and the way in which you as a teacher access student prior experiences and perhaps misconceptions. An example offered here is diagnostic teaching, in which again you as a teacher begin with what the student knows and then try to address those prior understandings and misconceptions. Moving to the knowledge-centered field, the notion is that there is a body of knowledge. There's actually a well-organized body of knowledge that we hope our students will gain. This might be organized around standards. This might be organized around disciplinary understanding. But this is where we want our students to go deeply into as they begin to have their learning experiences. And then finally, the assessment-centered learning begins with the end in mind. The philosophy here is that assessment provides an opportunity for feedback and revision for students rather than kind of a gotcha. Here, formative assessment is very important, as are the theoretical frameworks that we use when we design assessments. So, for example, an authentic assessment might look very different than other types of assessment, and that relates back to your theories or understanding of student learning. Finally, all 3 spheres are situated within the community context. This could be more local, like in the classroom, and those refer to those sets of norms and expectations you have for students. We've heard quite a bit about this in recent years. For example, moving away from a deficit-based thinking towards more of an outcomes-based thinking. We also could consider the way in which we engage parents or other local stakeholders, and finally, the way in which the content that we teach in the classroom connects with the world beyond school. So again, I offered these readings, which were fairly general in nature, focused on the brain science, alongside the readings focused on social studies teaching and learning and its purposes, to further refine the way in which our philosophies about teaching will impact the way in which we operationalize our practice in the classroom.